This is the announcement for Module 2 for English 122. And I first of all want to say that I really appreciated all of your discussion boards, introducing yourself and telling about a time when you had to think critically. I really enjoyed getting to know you, and I really got interested and enjoyed reading about how you were thinking through sometimes at times of your life that were very difficult. The thing that I think is really cool is we've started to really build support for one another, and I appreciate that also. This module is one on analysis, which is kind of cool. It's a little bit of a deeper reading, analyzing things as you are reading. Um, just takes your reading to a different level. It is the difference, maybe, of say if you're watching a movie and it's just entertainment versus maybe watching a documentary on something that you're really interested in. So, with the documentary, you're going to ask questions and you're going to be shocked at some of the things that you hear. And so it's a different kind of reading, and it is the analysis side of things is kind of the way that you want to go when you're doing college level reading, especially when you get into the items that you are going to write about. So, one of the things that this introduction talks about is something called pre reading. I happen to have a master's degree in reading, and pre reading is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So, what I did in Module 2, in about the second or third screen, you actually have the option to download the module. Now, there's a lot of great things about reading these digitally. Um, and there's a lot of activities that I think are really fun. But I also like hard copies of things. Whenever I was doing my master's program, I made sure I had things completely, even though I could have read everything online, I liked having things in hard copy because then I could highlight and um, take notes, write notes on the side, write questions, talk about something else that I had read elsewhere that I would incorporate into a conversation with that material. So I really like hard copies, and this is an example. This screen here is an example of the module 2 printout, and they did a really good job with this too. I'm really impressed because of the colors and the images. I think that's very, very helpful. But you can see that there are some things that you can read, pre read. As you are looking at this, and pre reading is kind of a way to get a map of where we're going when we're getting ready to read something. We can pre read a test if the computer will let us. We can pre read a book, we can pre read a module, we can read a chapter in a book, we can pre read just about anything, and we want to just pay attention to some key things. So, the first thing that you want to look at is the title. What is analysis? So, maybe you have a good grip on what that means, but maybe not. And it's okay if you don't, because you're going to learn about it. So you look at the title and you think through what is it that this chapter is going to be about. Then the next thing, and I used to think as a student that I was just being lazy and trying to get away with, doing the least, but really it is really important to find out how long the piece is. So the second thing I want you to do is just kind of skim to see how long it is. You know that if this is a 6-page document and the last page is only a partial page, so about 5.5 pages. It does have some nice visuals, so it's not solid 5.5 pages. But it's a whole lot different if you're reading something that's 5.5 pages versus something that's 20 pages, right? So, what you don't want to do is get into a reading like this and think it's only going to be 5 pages and then it tends to be 20, because then what happens to your attitude? It kind of stinks, right? You get very demotivated when you realize how much more you have to read. So, knowing how long the item is really helpful. It just kind of helps us keep a good attitude about what we're reading. Then, as you are going through, and we're not going to do a deep dive in as we're pre reading, we only want to take a minute or two as we're doing it. Um, so you're going to look for certain things. You're going to look for headings and subheadings. And I kind of say there's four things all at one time: headings, subheadings, not grammar. That's the English teacher in me. Headings, subheadings, vocabulary, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, and graphics, anything visual. Okay, so here we have a picture with somebody being really specific about where he or she is reading. We have how do we analyze. So very cool. You might not know what analysis is, but here we are going to read about what it is. And you've got another someone reading through. We've got some active reading strategies. These are fabulous, by the way. Reading context, purpose, and audience in your introduction. These were some things that the intro said this is what we were going to talk about, and it is part of analyzing what we're reading. So context, purpose, and audience. And again, we have kind of, a visual to help us to remember. 2-3, reading, style, diction, and tone. So those things are grouped together. Why are they grouped together? What does that mean? Diction to me means speech. Well, how does speech relate to reading? So I might not know the answers to all of these questions, but just the fact that I'm asking the question means that I'm actively reading it, because then you'll read to find out the answer. And that's what we want. We want active reading. And then we have style, diction, tone. And guess what? Style. And here we talk about MLA or APA, different types of style. I'm looking for diction and I'm looking for tone. That's what I would expect with those three things. Here we go. Diction. See, I predicted what the order was going to be based on what the author had given me. And sure enough, style, diction, and tone. And then we've got some example of different tones: humorous, reflective, pedantic. What does that mean? I've heard it several times, but maybe I don't know what it means. Maybe I'm going to keep an eye out to see if I can figure that out. So this just kind of gives you an overview of what you're reading. So the four things that you're going to look at are the headings, subheadings, which is what we did, anything graphic, and then any kind of vocabulary. And what I mean by vocabulary, many times, especially in textbooks, you will have words that are bold printed, or you will have words that are italicized. So those are the words that just kind of draw your attention. It's probably a new word, and it's not something that you want to sit and take a lot of time figuring out what these words mean in the moment, because you just want to get a quick overview. That's what pre-reading is. But in 5 pages, if you had 5 words that were bold printed, well, that wouldn't be too much. If you had 20 words that were bold printed, you might think, wow, this might take me a little while to get through this. So again, it's just kind of setting you up to read and to be successful, and to kind of approach the reading the way, in a realistic way. The other thing that some people do, especially in longer texts, is they will read the intro to something, and maybe the intro is even before. Usually in something that might be 5 pages, it might be a paragraph. And then as you are reading through, looking for the headings, subheadings, graphics, and vocabulary, you might read the first line of every paragraph. And again, this goes very quickly. You don't have to learn the information at the moment. You're just getting an idea of where you are. It's like when, if you were to move to a new neighborhood, you would drive through and the first thing you would do is kind of look to see what's around, what are the restaurants that are around, what can I walk to, are there any parks, are there any walking trails? You're just kind of figuring out the lay of the land. And so the last thing that you want to look at sometimes at the end, and again, especially of textbook chapters, at the end, there might be some questions. Now, here we have some activities, but there might be some questions, and usually those are things that help us direct where we pay attention in our reading. So if the author were to give us questions or objectives, either at the beginning of a reading or at the end of the reading, they kind of help us to know what's most important. And so again, it just kind of gives us the overall general impression of what we're getting ready to read. So I'm not saying you have to print these out. Some people will choose to do so. Some people will choose to just do everything online. And there are lots of fun things to do with the online version of this. So I certainly want you to engage in those things as well. So pre-reading helps us to not feel lost in the middle of a reading. It can help us to understand more of what we're reading, and it can help us to remember what we're reading for longer periods of time. And who in the world wants to read something twice, right? Sometimes we have to, especially at the college level, but I certainly worked hard when I was a student to make sure I happened to be a slow reader, and I worked really hard to not have to reread something because of how slow I read. And so I would take notes, I would highlight things, and I would just make sure that I understood as I was going through because I had so many other things to do in my life. Well, that's it for the announcement for Module 2. I am going to be starting getting things graded for Module 1. I hope that you are having a great time in the course. And as always, if you have any questions, things you think somebody else might have a question, the same question about, make sure that you throw it into a general discussion board. And then if it's anything that's just private, then just email me. Here's an example of something. There was at least one student that had a hard time getting the video to work last week. That would be a great thing to throw into the general questions, because if he was having a hard time getting the video to work, probably other people were as well. And so I figured out other ways to post the video. So again, if you have any problems, you are probably not the only one. So make sure you ask those questions. All right. I look forward to reading your materials from Module 1 and continuing to watch you progress through Module 2. I hope you have a great week. Bye.